Henry. Welcome to this episode of The Healthy Bit. We're going to talk about ultra-processed food today, and I know we're both very excited to dive into this topic. How are things going for you at this time of year with people asking you about ultra-processed food coming up to the festive period?
Yeah, hi Hayley. Yeah, good to chat. Yeah, I guess UPFs are, they've become quite, I don't know if the word trendy is the right word, but they've certainly been in the zeitgeist. And for probably the last couple of years, it seems like they've been really heightened. There's always that kind of little kind of ripple effect that you start reading stuff in the news and books come out and, the BBC does a documentary on it and then it kind of disappears away and then another article comes back. And we find kind of working in the baking industry that it's something that we're really conscious of, and we can talk more about what they are and how they use etc. But it's probably in the last like 6 months, customers, particularly when they come to visit the bakery or talking face to face, start asking questions about what are the ingredients that are going in, why are you using certain things, what does that mean, why is it there, and I guess for me it's about trying to remove as many as possible. Obviously, baked goods are processed and by their very nature, so it is a processed good. And some things are there because we have to put them in there, and then other things actually they're there for a justified reason, but we might have an alternative. So it's kind of like giving people options. But we're definitely seeing more and more customers, particularly I guess the ones that are kind of health conscious, so like your retail shops, where people are really looking at the label. Maybe the customers that are buying stuff to put on a cafe menu where, as a customer, you might be buying a sandwich or I don't know, a burger or something, and you're not necessarily getting the full list of ingredients unless you ask for it. But obviously when you're in a restaurant, unless you've got an allergen, you're probably not going to ask. You're just going to, order it and eat it. And they're maybe less conscious, particularly if they're, particularly places that are producing, delicious burgers, but maybe have, you know, American plastic cheese and all the other sauces and whatnot that go into it. So maybe they're less fussed because maybe they feel like they're not, trying to offer healthy food. But it's definitely something that is becoming more kind of talked about. And I guess for me, I've been, very aware of, trying to, when you cook from scratch, it's actually really hard to put ultra processed foods in your or whatever they are into your foods because you're kind of cooking from store ingredients and stuff. But I guess it's so easy just to kind of not read the back of the label. Whereas for me, I'm always studying the back of the label, and my kids are always like, "Dad, can you stop reading the back of the label?" Particularly when it's something that they want. But I don't know. I guess I'm just maybe just a little bit cynical, and also just curious to be like, what's in it?
What's in it?
Like, is this stating what it should be? It's got a nice lovely packaging and it's got, a picture of I don't know, like a sunflower or a heart on it or something. And actually, I just want to see, is this actually what it says it is? And normally it's not.
Yeah. And I think when I don't know about you, Henry, but when obviously you have being a mum and also a mother to a daughter with an allergy, I think as a mum I was wanting to give my daughter the best food anyway, so we very much always have tended to cook from scratch. But when you're out and about and you're trying to find a snack and something healthy for a child, if you're not near home or you're traveling or something like that, it's really, really difficult. But having an allergy, it
Very
makes
difficult.
you look more at the ingredient list. I think I've
Yes.
mentioned this before that I've actually used, when she was young enough, I used the nut allergy as an excuse not to give her some of the foods because I saw the amount of E colors and everything that goes in it.
Yeah, yeah,
That I
yeah.
just thought, I don't want to give this to you anyway. Like I just feel terrible
Yes.
handing over this basically laboratory of chemicals to you. And
Yes.
like you said, we're completely bombarded with ultra processed foods around us, and it's although the awareness is going up in terms of how we shouldn't be eating these types of food, it's almost becoming more impossible to find the healthier options because you go around
Yeah, totally.
supermarkets and you can cut out most of the aisles just by going, I'm just not going to go down those ones because I just
No.
need to head for the vegetables and the
Isn't there
fruit
like a
and the
rule
dairy.
that you just walk around the outside is like the safe bit and then the inside bit avoid them?
Avoid.
I've definitely seen that a meme on the internet. And yeah, you're totally right. It's an absolute minefield. And there's probably, there's certain kind of UPFs that, well, I guess probably maybe it'd be quite good to like define what a UPF is. And
Mm,
I'm not by no means an expert. I'm just a kind of I guess I know bits about that would happen in the or ingredients that would be used in the baking industry, but obviously there's the world of food and technology, and is pretty vast, and a lot of these products have been created like possibly with good intentions, or like that they were doing a specific job, whether that's keeping something crispy, or stopping something from staling, or stopping something from going moldy, or keeping something soft. There's quite often a reason, and quite often it comes down to like actually, if you're like say take a loaf of bread, if I've baked a loaf of bread and I've used really high quality ingredients, and then you buy it, but then on day two it's now only good for toast, and then you end up chucking half away, well then that feels like a waste. So then, you as a consumer and me as a producer, we get together and chat and go like, well, hey, how can we like solve this problem? So we might be like, oh, well, maybe you could freeze some of the bread, or maybe you could, have a bigger family and eat more of it, or buy a smaller, or maybe I could add this little ingredient in and it will keep the bread a bit softer. So then that will last for 3 or 4 days before it goes for toast. And you're like, great, I'm now saving money. And it's so what starts off as like actually quite a kind of innocent and kind of sensible thing to be like, yeah, of course we should, do this little tweak to this loaf to now make it last longer. But suddenly, you know, there is those kind of unintended consequences. And I guess suddenly it becomes bread's lasting 6 weeks. And now you've got to put all these other things in there to like, stop it going moldy or stop it smelling bad, or whatnot. And then before you know it, you've got 42 ingredients and the rest, and none of it's good for you.
Exactly.
And it probably is like, why did it take us this long to figure out that maybe putting a load of like non-natural ingredients that have been,
Yeah.
made in ways that probably actually, if you saw the process, you wouldn't be that um, pleased to then put it in your body.
No, and it's like I kind of really distinctly remember, I think that's when I got into science. And I distinctly remember studying it, and food technology is obviously an area that I remember being quite popular at the time, and talking about exactly what you said in terms of food technologists looking at how can we create food that is appealing to customers. And it was all about consumer kind of selling to consumers, and actually, like you say, making products that are the longevity of them, but also looking for the best taste and flavor and smell and experience. And hence why when you open up a pot of Pringles, you get that crunch, and it's that's also triggering all different kind of sensations in your body and your brain to kind of want you to
Yes,
eat more, including the products that they use
very clever.
make you want to. And I mean, very clever marketing, isn't it? So there's the whole marketing side to it, and how they were trying to develop all of those things to make it a really good customer experience. But also now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I feel like now that it's turned a bit of a corner, in the sense that they're now looking to see, quality of ingredients seems to be going down. So it's like they're trying to create this same products. Let's take just for example, say like a chocolate product. The amount or
Yes,
percentage of cocoa or whatever they're using is probably declining because the cost, or maybe they
yeah,
can't import it or access it. I'm not sure the exact
yeah.
reasons, but
It'll
quality's going down.
Speak from experience, it'll definitely be cost. That'll be the main driver because, okay, so at my bakery, we used to make a brioche bun, and it had, I might have told this before, but it had about 20% of the weight of flour was butter, so it was like super indulgent. It was like a proper classic brioche bun, had egg yolks in it, free range egg, proper butter, quality flour, and lots of milk, again, organic milk. And it was a very premium product. But then as time went on, we had to keep putting the price up because the price of things like butter and eggs, keep going up, and so we have to pass that cost on to the customer. And then the customer turns around and goes, "I can't afford to keep putting the price up. I'm going to have to buy an alternative." We're forced with a situation of like, well, we either just go, "No, this is the product we're selling," but you're working with customers who are a significant part of your business. You can't just like say goodbye to them because you're like you've employed people to like produce this product for them. So you naturally come to a situation where you go, well, we could take some of the butter out, we'll just make it 10%, and then you do some samples and it's like, yeah, it's fine. By the time you've got the burger and the sauce, no one's going to notice, and it's still a brioche. And then you fast forward another 5 years and now you're down to 5%, and you're like, well, it's not really a brioche anymore, but we've taken the eggs out. We've now put soya flour in because that kind of does the same thing. And that kind of, maybe we can make it vegan because that kind of fits that market, and it's cheaper. And so you go on this kind of like sliding scale, and it's all done with like good intentions because, as a business, we're just trying to like please our customer. And they're also, if our costs are going up, their costs are going up. And so we're all kind of like just making these little decisions, and then you suddenly fast forward and you're like, well, now I'm making a product that isn't, we don't even call it brioche anymore. We've changed its name. It's now got 2% butter. It's still a lovely product, but it's like it's and it still costs about the same as the original brioche because prices have gone up. But we've managed to kind of maintain it. So in some respects, like you could look at that and go, well, it's kind of like a form of shrinkflation in some respects. Like but it's like we've like downgraded the quality of the ingredient to make something that's then more affordable. Now, that small example for me is a bakery, but you do that as like a big chocolate manufacturer. Well, if you're trying to keep your chocolate bars at a competitive price and you don't want them to double in price because people are going to be outraged, well, you either make them smaller or you find a way to make them cheaper. Well, mass produced stuff's already pretty cheap because it's on a continuous line and it's hard to make that too much more efficient. So then it's just downgrade the ingredients. So like put less cocoa in. Chocolate's really expensive. Chocolate's been flying up this year. It's ridiculous how expensive chocolate is now. So if you can put less in and you can substitute it with something cheaper, great. The consumer may not know. And then you have to get even more clever by putting more of these funky ingredients because obviously if you've got something like chocolate that it melts in your mouth, it's got that lovely aroma, it coats, all that stuff. Now you've removed that, you've got to recreate it, but you've got to do it with synthetic stuff, and that's when food becomes like an engineered laboratory, incredibly clever people doing incredibly clever stuff to make it mimic what the original was like. And that's great, but it turns out it's probably not very good for you.
No. And then that's the impact on the body, isn't it? Because it's a bit like when people sort of substitute sort of sugar for the kind of sweeteners and things and anything in the body. We've got receptors in the body. So it's going to trick the body to think that you're getting certain food sources or food
Yes.
types or that experience in the brain and that kind of trickery that you just mentioned. But I think as you said, sort of I think how people define ultra processed food, I think is really variable across the population. And I think whether that's down to just awareness or education or even just personal interest in health. So some people are very health conscious and they're sort of really into it. And it seems to be you're either really into it or you're really not bothered. And some people
Yeah.
are still on the not bothered pile. And that to me is quite terrifying because it's around us all the time. It's impossible not to pick. And I don't know if you're like this, but whenever I go to a shop, I'm fascinated by what people put in their baskets. And it is hard if you
Totally.
want to go and buy something from a shop because you're on the
Yeah.
road or you're traveling. And there you are standing with your like one piece of fruit because that's the healthiest thing you found. And you've probably had to probably go for a salad because but it's still a bit processed because it's in a box and it's probably been added, other things added to it. So it's not the best. But then you're standing amongst people who are probably packing their trolleys and it's like spot the healthy bit literally. So it's trying to find the one thing that you think, gosh, their supermarket trolleys just rammed with refined white bread, crisps, chocolates, everything, fizzy pop, and you think, blimey, and you just think your body cannot cope with that. And then we wonder why the health and the population's health is really suffering. And we all know, don't we, that ultra processed foods probably going to increase our risk of cardiovascular disease, and the chances of having possibly a stroke or coronary artery disease is higher, and it's something high like 40 to 66% increase if you do eat these kinds of foods, alongside risks of cancer and having heart related issues, and just basically having high blood pressure, and even impacts on mental health and sleep and that sort of thing. But I don't think the more microbiology impact is spoken about, and that's what interests me because it can impact on your tendons, on your bone cells, on your muscle cells. People probably don't think about that when they pop these things into their mouth, but it is, and they wonder probably why their tendons have stiffened up, because our tendons, rely on collagen, and these ultra processed foods can really impact on the kind of process that the tendon goes through in terms of the tendon cell turnover. And then what impact that has in terms of any kind of recovery and if you're not exercising and what else is your diet like, and what else do you even exercise? Some people might not, and they're having a high sort of level of ultra processed foods. So then they're going to get fatty infiltration into their muscles, and it's a whole cascade of chaos that's going on through their body. And then they wonder why, we're seeing a generation that's getting weaker because their fat level to protein and muscle combination is poor. So the kind of ratio between the two is significantly impacted on, but just by what we're putting into our mouth. And that really
Mm.
terrifies me actually as a concern for the population.
When when you're in the shops and you're scouting around and looking in other people's trolleys, noted.
Sound
Yeah,
really
we all do
nosy,
that,
don't
don't
I?
we? Not judging, just having a little look. What have you got there? Oh, I wouldn't have made that choice. The Yeah, sorry, less of that. But is there any like certain ones aside from all UPFs? Is there certain ones that like are real red flags for you, or ones that you like? Oh, if I see that, I just avoid it, kind of thing,
Yeah, I think it's the
or is it all of them?
it is it's kind of all of them. The one actually I think the one out of all of them at the moment is the processed meats, because of the risk. The World Health Organization have listed things like ham and other meat products as like a grade, I think grade 1 or the highest grade of carcinogenic level. So that really worries me, and the fact that we still give our children ham sandwiches is, to me, just
Mhm.
is really worrying. So I I ban.
So is that the
Yeah, we've got the nitrate side of
your
things, but it's kind of the impact on the bowel and how these processed meats can really increase your risk of bowel cancer, and it's linked with that
mm,
very strongly. And also the fact that the World Health Organization, and we know that these meats do put that they're just a carcinogen. You'd be better to something else that you could eat is probably much healthier. So probably even processed cereals are probably a better choice than like your processed meats, if you had to pick out of the
yes.
two. So I don't cringe so much when people put cereals in their supermarket trolley, but when I see packets of bacon and ham, and it doesn't seem that people eat it in moderation. It's when you also go to pubs and places like that you're getting served burgers, and it's just loaded with all the other kind of processed meats. That worries me a
All that
little bit.
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, okay.
back in the day,
So, because I used to be a butcher, Haley, back in a few years ago. So, and we used to make our own hams and bacon and stuff. I actually won a butchery award for our oat smoked ham.
lovely.
Anyway, got a gold star. Anyway, and I guess it's kind of it because obviously from my point of view, and that's why I wanted to ask like which one's trigger because I I probably have other ones that trigger me, and then maybe bacon doesn't. Like, I mean, I happen to love bacon, and I probably eat too much of it. But I would always, I guess, for me, I would always try and buy bacon from a butcher that makes it themselves. Now, obviously, I know it's got salt in it because you have to have salt, and it'll probably have some kind of nitrate in it because of if it stays pink. Whereas if you don't put the nitrates in it, it doesn't stay pink. But most bacon that you see out there tends to have nitrate in it for keeping that pink color. But I guess, I don't know, in my mind, I would see that as like, well, if it's been dry cured and then it's been hung and it's been sliced, it's come from a good pig, that's probably better. Or in my mind, I wouldn't be thinking about getting bowel cancer. But totally, if I saw, if I was picking up, cheap Danish bacon, that's been wet cured and it's just been, I don't know, like it's come from a pig that's been barn reared or, whatever. It's not had, a good diet itself. Um, I don't know, but maybe that's just cope. I don't know. Like,
I agree.
would you kind of see all bacon as being bad or?
No, so I'm like you, Henry. So I'm talking more about the very cheap meats that you
Yeah,
find
gotcha.
classically in the supermarket. So those kind of like wafer thin ham pieces that just don't
Yes,
resemble
yes,
ham in any sense. So if
yes.
as much as I'm sort of health conscious, I'm not perfect. So if
Who is?
who is, but you try your hardest. And I think, and I always kind of relate it to. the good old days, like a grandma, a 90-year-old that's alive today, they would go to the butchers and they'd get decent quality ham. And I think if you're going to eat ham, that's
Yeah,
exactly what I would do. Because like you
yeah,
said, you've got, it's where you source that from. So if my
yeah,
daughter wanted a ham sandwich, I'd say, well, look, we're just not going to go to the supermarket and get it because it's ridiculously bad for you. But I would say let's go and try and get the best ham we can get from the butcher. So I'm not against that in any sense. It's that really awful
yeah.
the stuff that
But
you
also,
cringe at too, Henry.
you know,
Not your award
the,
winning
the, the
ham.
cheaper stuff that, yeah, 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 yeah. The stuff that comes in a square,
Yeah.
and it's all nicely sliced up. You know that, you know, yes, it's pork and it's got salt in it, but it's probably got a load of other ingredients. And there'll also be a whole load of non-declarable ingredients as well because they're classified as processing aids. So if you can read, 10 ingredients, there's probably another 8 or 9 that have been added that you don't even know about, and they'll be kind of enzyme-based ingredients that will do something, but they'll vanish during the processing part of the curing, and or the boiling, whatever it is, and then they don't have to declare it. But there's almost no way of you checking as a consumer whether it's in there. Like the only way you'd find out is if you became a big buyer of that ham from the factory, and then you could ask them for their in detailed spec sheets that would then have all of the non-declarable stuff on. But they wouldn't give that to you as a customer. Like you'd have to be buying tons and tons and have a multi-year contract. And so you just don't know. So I guess you're probably right. The best thing to do is just don't eat it, because if you can't, you've got no way of verifying all the stuff that's in it. Just don't eat it.
So
It's probably
how
the easiest thing. But it
Yeah,
is,
'cause I was just going to say, so if you go to like a so someone like me, Henry, then who doesn't have to buy meat in as a butcher and has to cut it up. So if as a normal regular mum, wanting to go and get, if someone is going to eat a little bit very tiny in very small amounts, if you did want to buy it, is all ham very much the same when you go to butchers, or is it very variable in terms of what you could be getting?
is is variable. I mean, depends on the butcher, but a lot of them will buy the ham in, so it's probably then made in a fairly big factory, um, somewhere. There's near us, near Bristol. There's a big meat processing plant, and if you live nearby it and the wind blows in the wrong direction, it smells pretty bad. Thankfully, I don't live next to it, but they process, I think, about 7,000 pigs a day, and they're making for Waitrose, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, M&S. They're making for all of these different supermarkets, but they'll also be producing for you know trade accounts, so for butchers and wholesale butchers, etc. And so actually, even if you go to your butcher and you see that nice ham ready to be sliced, it might be the same ham that ends up in
Wait.
Waitrose, but it just hasn't been sliced and put in a packet. So actually, it's gone through the same thing. So I think for me, it's about building up a relationship and building up trust. So if you've got a local butcher that you can chat to, and they're like, oh yeah, we cure it ourselves. Well, if you're interested, you'd be like, well, what are you curing it in? Like, and this is a lot of effort just to find out how your bacon's made. And actually, you probably get to the point where you're like, well, I'll just make my own bacon, because if you're making it yourself, you don't need to put nitrates in, because you're not worried about it looking grey when it cooks, because it's only you eating it, not you're not trying to sell it to a consumer. And that's probably how most um, bacon would have been consumed. People would have had I don't know, a village pig, and then they would have cured it, and then they'd have eaten it. That was kind of like the old way, but that's not the world that we live in at the moment.
No.
But that's, I mean, that's extreme. I'm not suggesting that we all need to have a pig in the back garden and start curing our own. If I find myself retiring, I would quite like to have a couple of pigs and do a bit of
Yeah.
curing.
But then that's a more
But only because
organic
I like it.
that's a more organic way of doing it, isn't it? So then, to me,
Yeah,
that's like,
totally.
if you're going to have, like, I would almost love to have lived in the olden days when they did do it like that, because
Mm,
I think, like, I can't, you just imagine the taste and the flavour, can't you? That it's just done.
yeah,
So yeah, so if someone did that and they would live down the road, that's when I would eat that. A little bit of that.
yeah, yeah. Fine, fine, fine.
But yeah, it's the stuff that just is not resembling any kind of meat in any form,
No,
which is my thing.
no.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
like.
I like the rule. If you can't pronounce it, it's probably. And I don't mean that for, like, foreign food. Obviously, there's lots of Greek dishes that I can't pronounce, but I'd still eat them because they're delicious. But, if you're reading a label and it's got some long word and you're like, I guess it's when you look at like face cream or shampoo, like half the ingredients you're like, I can't pronounce that because it's just
Uh-huh.
it's lecithin or something. And when you see those names in your food, and you're like, no, I think that's probably something to avoid. But it is tricky. I think ones that trigger me or I'm kind of hyper aware of. So for me, one of them is a kind of veg oils
Oh, really?
sneaks in. Now, obviously, veg oils are in absolutely everything, whether that's rapeseed oil or sunflower oil. I did that sad thing of finding out how they made it. Now, not the kind of cold pressed stuff that you get, from your local farmers market, whatever. The kind of the cheaper vegetable oils. And actually, when you see how they're made, it's a pretty grisly looking process. A lot of kind of chemical extraction and then lots of kind of oxidization, and then they flavor it or they remove the flavor because it's so bitter and disgusting. And so there's a lot of processing to get to this kind of cheap fuel, and then it's quite often sold with a nice little healthy heart on it, or kind of lowering saturated fat, so whatever that might be, and that sounds like a good thing, and for me, it's something that I try and avoid and not eat. But when you start checking ingredients, it's in absolutely everything. And the bit that I really hate is when, I don't know, for example, I picked up some tin mackerel the other day and it said in extra virgin olive oil. I was like, great. So I picked it up. Now that was written nice and big and bold on the front from a reputable brand. And then I flipped it around and it was 10% extra virgin olive oil, 90% sunflower oil. And so you just have to double check. And I was like, actually, I don't want that. So then I bought the one that was in spring water and then added my own olive oil on top. And all things like pestos, like the kids quite often like, you know, pasta pesto. Actually, they've grown out of that, but we definitely went through a stage of, it was a kind of an easy supper. And, sometimes we'd make it ourselves, but occasionally, you're caught short and you're like, oh, I'm just going to grab a jar. And then you read the ingredients and you're like, well, it's got, 3% extra virgin olive oil. And then the rest of it is bulked out with this cheaper, well, some people on the internet would call it industrial sludge. Anyway, that's maybe a bit inflammatory, but like, it's back to that analogy of like, how can we make this pesto and how can we keep it affordable? Olive oil is very expensive. Therefore, we need to substitute it with a cheaper ingredient, but still put a little bit of olive oil in so then we can name it. And it's just that kind of slow degradation of the quality of the ingredients going in. And I guess, fats are an expensive product. Butter's expensive, coconut oil's expensive, extra virgin olive oil's expensive. So if you're trying to like recreate those products, then sunflower oil's incredibly cheap. Rapeseed oil grows all over the UK. It's a cheap commodity, and therefore you can make cheap fat. And so if you can market that as being good for you, and as a kind of like, oh, it's healthier than butter kind of thing, then us as the consumers, we're like, well, who do you trust? You just gotta like, you try and I try not to be cynical, but the you only have to kind of look around, but also how it makes you feel. Like I know that if I eat, a load of chips down at the fish and chip shop, um I feel dreadful afterwards. And you're like, but when I cook them at home, and if I'm cooking chips at home, I'll either do them in, I quite often do them in coconut oil or beef tallow or dripping, and I don't feel awful. And I'm like, well, it's the same potato, they've been deep fried by all accounts. Why does the one that's been deep fried in vegetable oil make me feel awful and kind of greasy, whereas, the one cooked in a kind of a more natural fat doesn't? And so I guess I just benchmark it on that. But that for me has become a bit of a kind of a red flag. So when I see it and it's in all products and it's in, crisp biscuits, any kind of sandwich, mayonnaise. So like I can't even buy sandwiches now because pretty much every sandwich has got, it's a little slick of mayonnaise in it. And then it's like, there you go, veg oil. And because obviously mayonnaise is made up of veg oil. Um,
Do you feel the same about? I remember when there was a big push for rapeseed oil, and it was like you got to have
mm,
rapeseed oil and don't. I forget what they were trying to tell you.
I was part of that.
Not
When me and my brother were doing our TV show, we were this is Britain's answer to olive oil. We were big champions in it because it was like, it's cheaper, it's got more flavor. Granted, we were talking more about the kind of the cold press stuff, not the kind of vegetable oil stuff. But I still, I just have olive oil now, like
yeah,
personally.
yeah. So what is it that? Because I can see you're really passionate about the oils there,
Very
Henry.
good
It's
point.
really good to see. So, what is it about the vegetable oil? Because this is probably where my knowledge is a bit more limited. So, in my understanding is that you should always try and have olive oil, the best olive oil you can have.
Yeah.
Even if you have that one, save that one for salads and like you say, you kind of dips or whatever you're making or using it for. Then if you're cooking, if you can't afford to keep up with the sort of high quality extra virgin olive oil, to use a basic olive oil if that's what you're cooking with. But I
Yeah,
can,
like a pomace oil or something. Yeah.
yeah, I can see that the vegetable oil. What is it about? Do you know what it is about?
Well, I think yeah. Well, I think probably initially I probably saw it on the internet. Someone flagged up of like, do you know how they make, and one of those kind of like shock clickbaity, shock horror things, and there's a little video, and then you watch, oh God, that doesn't look great. And then I just started doing a bit of kind of research about it, and the first of all, it's not an ingredient that we've eaten for a long time. So actually, it's a fairly modern part of a modern fat for our diet. So for thousands of years, we've been eating animal fats or coconut fat or olive oil or butter, etc. But actually, extracting a neutral oil out of a vegetable seed is actually quite difficult. And it was initially created out of the kind of during the Industrial Revolution as a kind of an engine lubricant. So essentially, it's engine oil, and and then obviously during the First World War, I believe production was ramped up because we had we were building all the tanks and the planes and all the all the stuff we needed. So they needed more engine lubricant. So then they started farming more of it, and then post the World Wars, you had this, particularly in America, you had a flux of young men who had been at war and now they needed work, and so they turned the tank factories into tractors, because that was a good thing to do, and then they started farming. Farming became a really big part of that kind of get America working again, and that makes sense. Like, I'm sure if I was in charge and you had thousands of men coming back looking for work, get them farming. That was like an obvious thing to do. And wars aren't great, but wars are great for like progressing technology. So that kind of necessity to innovate becomes really real. And so suddenly you had a nation coming back. They needed food, they needed work, and so it was like, well, so a lot of farming then became subsidized. So this is a bit of a potted history, but part of it was growing, kind of corn and wheat and these, seed oils essentially. So like whether that's cotton oil or sunflower or rapeseed, and they, so out of it, corn, you got the high fructose corn syrup, that, if you look in, I guess it's less in the UK, but when you go to America and you read nothing has sugar in it, it's all just high fructose corn syrup, that's their kind of cheap alternative because I guess they can grow a lot of corn out there because it's hotter. And then these oils that are produced in a factory, they have to go through lots of kind of treatment to, lots of different chemicals are added, etc. And you then get this oil out that's very stable and it kind of seems to work quite well. But also it was very cheap and plentiful. So then when you're, and now around about this time, industrial food's starting to kind of take off, and we're all getting kind of quite smart about, being clever with, whether that's making, I don't know, Magnum ice creams or, McDonald's or Snickers or whatever, whatever all these products are suddenly appearing in this kind of post-war boom, and the this fat is right at the heart of it, and I'm not saying it's the only culprit, but I guess you kind of look around, you're like, well, this ingredient didn't exist, and now suddenly, you see all the stats of people with, diabetes or inflammatory diseases or heart, coronary disease, or and probably loads of stuff that you see, and also just looking around, like being an observer of society, not in a judgmental way, but just like you know. And then also in our bakery, loads of breads have fats in them, and well, you know, using British rapeseed oil is like, wow, that's a good thing to do because it's got, and I was totally bought into that narrative, and then I've been on a bit of a mission of kind of removing it from our bakery. So and these things take time, it's complicated, and replacing it with um and this is, I guess, is where the tricky part is that, you need fat in your diet. And I think I read a stat somewhere a few years ago that like, I think it's like over 80% of the fats consumed in human diets around the world are coming from these seed oils. So they're not, so to suddenly say like, get rid of them, well, there's going to be a problem because people still need fat in their diet, and if you can't suddenly replace it with a more natural alternative, that's utopian. So like I don't have a solution for that, but I guess from a personal point of view, I just try and avoid them. I'm just like, well, that's something that I can control, and so it doesn't mean I don't eat crisps, but to be honest, it's fine. You get over it eventually.
Yeah, we don't eat crisps.
But then I would be less triggered by like the nitrate thing. So I'm always interested to hear like what triggers other people because I probably do look I quite like chorizo and like if I'm traveling, okay, so doing a bit of driving down the motorway, and I'll be honest here, if I stop off and I'm I need to get some fuel and I need to go to Lewin and I'm a bit hungry because I've been on the road for ages, quite often there's like an M&S or a Waitrose, and so I'll kind of have a little look around and I'll be, oh, what's salad? I don't know. Like, it's probably rubbish. It's probably got loads of stuff in it. And I might buy some fruit, but I'm quite partial to those like little cigarello things. It's like chorizo with a bit of cheese and it's all rolled up.
Okay.
But probably like if you read the back of that, and I know that it's like it's processed meat and it's cheap cheese. But I would look at that and be like, well, it's only a few nitrates. Hasn't got any seed oils in it.
I think
But
I think
yeah, I'll try harder next time.
yeah, I'm sure like doing it just very, very rarely. But there something like I think your risk is to all these health conditions are increased just even if your diet is made up of about 10% of ultra processed food. So we're not even talking about 90 to 100%. We're talking about even if your
Just a
diet, if you
small
look
amount.
across
Yeah,
what you eat, if 10% of it is, it still increases increases your risk significantly. So that's quite scary, isn't it? Because you think it would be more of a heavy consumption, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's actually like a sliding an incremental scale
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
if you're going to even step onto that ladder, you're still putting your body at risk and your health at risk.
Yeah, that I didn't know it was that low. I would have guessed maybe like 30% or something, but yeah, 10%. That's
Mm.
so. And if you kind of tot up what you actually eat in a day, that might be that one muffin that you picked up from a coffee chain that you just ate. It doesn't have to be that much, does it? Because 10%, is well, it's probably half the muffin.
Yeah,
You know,
probably is, isn't it?
um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to be to like avoid these things. You have to be basically a saint and cook everything from scratch.
Yeah, and then make
Yeah,
those and take them with you, which we do actually try and do that.
yeah,
Like we try and make stuff and freeze it and and then defrost it and then and that's where if we are going to have a cake, I'll have it as a homemade cake and just sort of try and
yes,
choose recipes carefully where try and reduce the amount of sugar within the recipes or try and use more natural sources or fruit and things like that. And there's ways of doing it, isn't there? Like somebody once said you could crush a banana into oats and make that as your sweet crumble top rather than like using sugar.
yeah, yeah,
And I just
yeah,
thought
yeah.
that's a really lovely kind of way of doing
Yeah, quite,
it.
quite, quite a good way of doing it. Yeah, yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, I think, I guess, if you're cooking from scratch, it's fairly easy to avoid um, these products. The probably the place where you want to be careful is if you like adding, your kind of your srirachas or your different Asian sauces and stuff. Because quite often, you've made a lovely stir fry and you've got, fresh produce and you're cooking it and you've chopped it all and stuff. And now you're kind of, making it, adding a bit of flavor. And actually, that's probably where you need to be a bit careful because they're just, those kind of default ones. I mean, like I really like. I don't eat it all the time, but like Liam pairings, for example, I'd be like, that's quite tasty. But actually, probably, I mean, it probably is a UPF to a certain extent. If you look at the ingredients, there'll probably be stabilizers or something in there that keeps it going. I don't know. I have to check.
Yeah,
I think Tabasco is fairly clean label.
I think you've told me on a previous episode not to use the Liam parents actually, Henry. So um,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
no, I think I remember you saying because I think I said, yeah, I think it was like when we were talking about spaghetti bolognese or something. Or we've had this conversation, and you said, oh yeah,
No, I think I was meaning more from a kind of an unauthentic point of view, but it's fine. You use Liam pairings. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Because I mean, what else could you use? So I mean, so looking at healthier choices, then. So in terms of what should we be filling our pantries, cupboards, everything with in terms of what would you say are good products to use in Henry? I assume olive oil's on the top of your list.
Yeah, yeah. So for cooking, yeah, olive oil, coconut oil, and I'd always try and buy organic if I can. And I know that like that then does push the price up. But I always think that, um, knowing how farming works, and I've been to quite, I grew up on a farm, I went to quite a lot of farms, and when you know the chemicals that they're spraying onto those crops, it ain't great. Quite a lot of them have got the word "side" in, which is Latin for death. So, so if you can afford organic, go organic. And actually, I think organic uh coconut oil is not that expensive. You can kind of buy it in like a kind of kilo tub. It does make everything taste a little bit coconutty. But if you're making like a curry or an Asian food, then it's probably fine. I probably wouldn't roast my roast potatoes for Christmas dinner in coconut fat because it'll give them a slightly kind of tropical vibe. But and then for kind of like seasons and stuff, I mean, salt, I would always try and use like a sea salt, but like a crystal one. I actually went to a talk from the Cornish sea salt, and they're a salt that we use in the bakery, but they make a really beautiful, beautiful salt. And they were saying within their salt, they've got 82 different minerals. So they've had it like all fully tested.
Wow.
And because it's coming from an incredibly clear and clean part of the Cornish coast. And then, yeah, so actually, so they were saying like, if you're doing lots of exercise and you get cramp, you can buy these really like kind of electrolyte discs that you put in, and they tend to be like raspberry flavored or stuff. You read those ingredients, full of crap. So he was saying actually, you could just have salty water with our salt because it's got lots of the minerals in. If you want, you can put a bit of, a squeeze of lemon or something just to kind of make it taste a bit nicer. But actually, so a good quality salt, so no table salt, no rock salt, no kind of, you want it to be a nice natural sea salt. And for me, the Cornish sea salt is a great one. There's good ones up in Wales. Obviously, there's Malden, which is very famous. Though actually, Malden only has 42, I think, was it 38 or 42 minerals because it comes from an estuary, so it doesn't have quite the same kind of profile. So anyway,
The Cornish
he was saying it's quite good if you've got like mouth ulcers, you can kind of rub the salt in and it helps like reduce the inflammation. Anyway, and like clears it up.
is
So
Brit
yeah, good quality salt. Then things like spices. So if you're making curries or stir fries or you want a bit of flavor, just buying like whole spices and grind it yourself. Again, try and buy good quality ones. But at least then you know what you're getting. I mean, yeah, my kids do quite like a bit of Asian food, so we probably do have like yeah, kind of soy sauces and mirin and vinegars and stuff. I don't know. So, and maybe some of them you might have to, question, but I guess really bring a little bit in. But things like, like a good organic apple cider vinegar, great. It's like a lot of it's British made. It's fairly cheap. You can buy it in most supermarkets, even like Aldi and Lidl sell organic apple cider vinegar. It's great for your gut.
it is.
It really brings things alive. So actually, if you're just trying to, you made a soup or a stew or something that just needs a bit of lifting, a little splash of vinegar in really helps. And so that's have a good. So actually, like salt and acid, and then all you need that now is something to heat it. And a good frying pan or a good oven or a good barbecue, and actually you can make something quite delicious. That's probably like the absolute bare essential. Though I also am partial to mustard, so I'm a bit of a Dijon mustard fan.
I like Dijon mustard.
I don't know whether that counts as a UPF, but
I'm
I
not
just try
sure.
and buy good quality
Yeah.
one.
But I think if again, yeah, exactly. I think it's where you source it from, isn't it? If you turn it around and it's got eight other ingredients, then you might want to
Mm,
think again. But if you turn one around, it says
yeah,
100%. I think you're looking at percentages and the quantities of what else and what other ingredients are in with the product. No, product's going to be exactly the same, is it? So it's just trying to carefully select.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think I guess having been like, so I've been to America a few times, and I kind of go into the supermarket as a bit of a voyeur just to like have a look at the ingredients. And you kind of, there's like similar brands that you kind of recognize. And then so you like pick up I don't know, a ketchup, and you kind of like, I know the UK one's kind of it's got some stabilizers and it's got some xanthan gum. It's got, a few bits in there just to kind of stop it splitting. But then you look at the American one and it's got, 20 ingredients, and you're like, whoa. And so I think in the UK, we are quite lucky that there are a lot of UPFs in the foods, but we're not like inundated. Like you can still, you probably can still buy Dijon mustard that is just mustard seeds, vinegar, salt, and maybe, I don't know, there might be a processing area or something, but it's not like horrendous. Whereas, yeah, if you pick up an American mustard, it would, like just it's like a packet of toothpaste, the amount of ingredients in it. And so I think they've probably got a bit of a harder, which is probably why this whole kind of UPF thing is really being flagged up by people in America because they're just, they're just that much further, on the kind of they've buggered around with their food way more. They're trying to make it cheaper and smarter and bigger and all that kind of stuff. And actually, so hopefully we can learn from them and not go that way. I think that thing that you nailed on about price, trying to keep costs down. If we're trying to, manufacturers and producers are going to continue to produce food and try and keep it affordable, even if they're lovely people and have got great intentions, I think they'll naturally just end up degrading the quality of the ingredients. Yeah, that is pretty sad, and particularly when you see the impact it has on people. Like, I mean, I know for me, like if I eat, like a pizza from, an unreputable takeaway place, I will feel awful for, like it really throws me, and I just think, and I don't understand it in a judge way, but like if that's what you're eating all the time, like no wonder people are feeling dreadful
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
got issues.
I can't eat those pizzas that you've just mentioned 'cause, as a student when I was studying, I remember having a piece and it just made my heart race, and I'm a bit allergic
Yeah,
to
yeah, totally.
MSG, so my body's almost rejects anything where it's just like, "What on earth is that?" So I can tell what kind of awful preservatives or, MSG or whatever's been added to it to try and give it flavor or an
Yeah.
enhancer or whatever whatever it's supposed to be trying to do. 'Cause it's just horrible. And it's salty and you just get that real desire to you cannot drink enough water to kind of quench your thirst. Like, I don't know if you've ever had that, but, if you ever do have a piece of that sort of, type of pizza, you sometimes think, "Gosh, I
Oh yeah,
quench my thirst," and I just think, "What
it's
is that doing to my brain?"
no, totally. And also a lot of these, we talked about at the very beginning about, these things with like the course that you went on where it was about making things crunchy or making things, soft or, that kind of the aroma, most of it is designed to make you eat more. You know, they want you to like, once you pop, you can't stop. They're telling you exactly what they're trying to make you do. And and whereas like real food, really hard to like overindulge. Like if you made your own vegetable crisps, you would find it really hard to like eat packets and packets and just kind of keep nailing because it's uh like properly cooked food is it's not. I don't think it's addictive.
No, no.
I think you eat until you have that. What's that word? Is it satiety?
Yeah.
I
So,
don't know if
like,
that's the right
fullness.
word, but like that feeling of like feeling full, you just never get that. If you go eat at McDonald's, you just don't ever feel full. You're always like, I'm kind of still hungry. Whereas if you eat like a proper, a burger from good meat, it's been grilled nicely. It's got, nice tomatoes in it, nice lettuce, nice sauces, a good bun from a good bakery, you'll feel full. Like you'll be like, I don't need to eat anymore because it's like, it's real food going in. And
Yeah, and you probably
I
can
think,
make burgers healthy as well, can't you, Henry? Because you probably made, like, cheesy
okay.
burgers and you can actually probably turn something that would otherwise be deemed as, a burger, it's gotta be unhealthy, to actually you could make that a healthy vegetable burger and then, like you say, have all your salad and lovely bits in it, like your onion and all that side of things, and it ends up not being as bad for you as you think.
Yeah,
But you
yeah,
mentioned,
totally.
yeah, so just a moment ago, you mentioned you could perhaps make some vegetable crisps. Do you do you make them,
Yes.
and how do you make those, Henry? Do you do it in a particular way?
Well, I've made them a few times. I can't promise to say that I make vegetable crisps all the time. The easiest way to do it, so you kind of like frying them. If you want to like recreate a crisp, you need to then, um, I mean, you get it with potatoes, but like beetroot works really well, or like parsnips, or any kind of like root vegetable, carrots. You then want to, yeah, slice them really thinly on a mandolin. You can do it with a knife, but like to get that really kind of like wafer thin is going to be quite tricky. And you can even get mandolins that have like little crinkle cuts, so you can get like your kind of the real McCoy looking shape.
Yeah.
And now, if you wanted to make them like super crispy, you would then you would make a nice kind of mix of probably like potato starches, and you would coat them in it. So then when they crisp, that bit really fries up and gets crispy, and then they don't go soggy. You probably don't want to do that because you're probably not going to have potato starch knocking around your house. So then I mean, probably the best way to do it is just to bake them. So just a decent amount of olive oil or some kind of natural fat, and then season them. You could put some, some paprika on there. You could put some spices, whatever you fancy. Some garlic, some rosemary. Toss them around, and then kind of bake them in the oven. They're not going to be as, well. If you're having like a nice drinks party and you want to have some crisps and you don't want to just open up a bag of salt and vinegar and stick them in a bowl, you could do this and they would kind of look a bit kind of funky. They're going to be a bit different to they're not going to have that same kind of crispy crunch because actually recreating that, and I think recreating ultra processed food is really difficult to do that at home, and so actually it's probably just not worth trying. And that's why like the popcorn one's quite a good one because that is quite easy to cook some popcorn in some coconut fat and then just mix it with like either a little bit of sugar or a little bit of maple syrup or a bit of honey, or do a savory one. And actually, like people aren't then going to judge you so much, because it's not like you're not trying to recreate Walkers.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I think that's it. We've been fooled, haven't we? But
Yeah, yeah.
having those ultra processed foods around us so much that, like you say, it's so difficult to create because we're not a laboratory at home. We can't do that.
No,
That's interesting.
no.
So if you do that, so you'd have to probably cook them for quite a while if you're going to try and do a vegetable crisp. And like you say, probably best just to chop them up and use a nice.
But yeah, I tell you what, yeah, I've never tried it in an air fryer, and you might find that you could if you've got an air fryer. I haven't got one, but I reckon you because you've got so much air flowing around, you could probably make quite a good vegetable crisp in an air fryer.
Yeah, that it does say you can
If
do
anyone
that.
if anyone's got one, give it a go. Just put a little bit of oil on it, nice bit of seasoning, and then stick them in the basket and kind of plump them up so there's plenty of. And you might have to give them a bit of a shake, halfway through just to kind of make sure that all the sides are getting crisped up. But you might find that actually the air fryer works pretty well,
Yeah.
or you're gonna have to get your deep fat fryer out.
Yeah, because I think there's on the air fryer, there's the dehydrate and the air fryer function, isn't there? So it's
Okay,
the dehydrate would work better, would it? Or the
not no, you won't want to do the dehydrate. You'll end up with kind of they'll be kind of like chewy. So dehydrate would be great for things like apple rings, like slices of mango. Brilliant, because then you're going to get that nice kind of like intense chewy because it's going to remove all the moisture but keep all the sugars and that nice kind of flavor in. But for a piece of potato, I don't think dehydrated potato. None of your guests will come back, or they'll bring their own packet of crisps.
good. That's funny. Yeah, and then see that's why I don't cook. I like that.
Yeah,
And that's why I'm not the pro.
well, you can try things, Hayley. God loves a try.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I sort of love hate the air fryer. My concern with the air fryer, I mean, I love the convenience, and I think it's great if you can do things exactly what we've just said. If you can create a vegetable crisp that's really healthy. My concern is the coating on air fryers and how
Mhm.
healthy that is in terms of and I know that's a topic for another day, but that's my only thing. So I'm a bit on the fence with the air fryers at the moment. I sort of have a love hate relationship with it.
Not to go off topic, but the problem you find, and I've definitely had conversation with my wife, is that where you start finding out about something, and whether that's a coating on a pan or an ingredient in a packet of crisps or in a cake, or a coating on a waterproof coat, or a chemical soaked as a fire retardant in your mattress. The whole world is like stacked against us because we've got all these incredible, amazing things that like do all these wonderful stuff, but they're not natural and they're probably not great for you. To limit down to zero, you're going to have to live as a hermit in the middle of nowhere. But sadly, it'll be quite a lonely experience, and obviously will suit certain people. But probably, we live in this world, and we have to be like part of this world. So I guess I don't know. For me, it's about I guess it's about trying to like pick your battles and maybe not in battles, just like pick some like red lines, be like, right, I'm just gonna try not to cross this. And so I think particularly with the UPS, probably the easiest thing you could do is just, if you're overly reliant on like takeaways or eating out or or like pre-made stuff, just try and like reduce that down. So if you're having a takeaway twice a week, go to once a fortnight, and try and just like cook more from scratch because that's going to be the easiest way to like reduce stuff down. Obviously, once you get into it and you're like, well, say like a vegetable and you've got an organic one and a non-organic one, well, you could now be cooking from scratch, but now your non-organic one's covered in herbicides and pesticides and all sorts of sprays that are really not good for you. And there's no way of finding out what they've put on because that happened in the farmer's field. And, unless you've got access to the farmer, you've got no idea. So suddenly, you can just go deeper and deeper. And I think there's levels. And I think for me, it's about like, it's not about trying to scare everybody to be like, we've all got to live like hermits, but actually we can make decisions that can, maybe improve and try and reduce our kind of the amount of these kind of weird ingredients that aren't natural going into our diet. And I often hope that, like, someone in like 5,000 years will like look back and they'll see, like, right back from the Egyptians, and kind of log what people are eating, what people are doing, and there'll be this little kind of blip, in the kind of 21st century where we all got a bit clever about, what we could do with food, and then we'll go back and be like, that was stupid. We didn't make people healthier or happier. We made people sick, and let's not do that again. Anyway, that's like my hope. But obviously, we're currently living in that moment, and so we just have to do the best we can.
Exactly. And I think you said that really nicely, Henry. And I think with the sort of season upon us in terms of Christmas and New Year, and people thinking about possibly like what changes they might want to make for their health for 2026, consistency is key. And like you said, just trying to reduce some of the consumption is going, any change is a good change. So if there's somebody listening could actually make a reduction, it's going to significantly improve their health, and that's when it's really worth it.
Yeah,
And sometimes it's just knowing, isn't it, sort of little tips, which is why we wanted to do these episodes, because it's about those
yeah,
small little healthy small chunks that we can do that can make a big impact. So not always going, like you say, into complete extremism of living extra healthy and whatever. I mean, we both probably in our own fields do things to the max because that's what we know and that's what we enjoy and we're passionate about.
yeah, yeah,
In terms of just generally anyone listening, just trying to make some healthier choices, hopefully what we've discussed today might just help people make better decisions, and then their health will improve as a result. And I think that's all we can do, because it is tough out there to make good choices
totally,
all of the time. And I think
totally.
it's interesting because when we get to talk about some of this kind of lifestyle changes and habits, and also with setting New Year's resolutions and things like that, people often will fall down after about 4 weeks because they just completely set themselves a too big a challenge and it's not realistic. So
Really challenging. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
so I think it's just trying to do consistent change, isn't it? So yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Well, this it's been great to talk about this, and I think if this to me feels like a series, like there's so much to talk about. I mean, we've just talked about essentially processed meat and vegetable oils, and actually, this is a vast and deep subject. Anyway, maybe it's something that we'll have to come back to again and tackle some of the other sides of it. But yeah, it's great hearing your perspective, and yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. I think everyone's learnt lots from what you've said as well. So yeah, lovely to chat as always. And like you say, I think we better cover more of that in future episodes. So yeah, thanks very much, Henry. Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers, Hayley.